Hello, everyone. Thanks for being with us tonight. This is Sanger, a PhD candidate in linguistics at SUE. I'm very pleased that I see many of you have joined us. I'm also very pleased to introduce Dr. Michael Chyet for those who are joining us for the first time. Dr. Michael is a remarkable linguist, lexicographer, and teacher also. He served as a cataloger for Middle Eastern languages at the Library of Congress, having previously worked as senior editor of the Kurdish service of the VOA, the Voice of America, and as a teacher of Kurdish at institutions such as the Washington Kurdish Institute and the University of Paris. Dr. Michael Child also uh, fluent in multiple Middle Eastern languages like Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Turkish, Kurmanji, and Sorani, Kurdish among them also. Uh, he's also, let me say, a man with 45 languages and produces the landmark Kurdish English dictionary. So tonight's session is our second time with Dr. Michael. So if you join it the first one, you will already have some context. And if you didn't, no worries, we will catch you up and I will also send you by email all the interviews material we have done with Dr. Michael so far. But before we begin the interview proper, I have two quick notes for everyone. The first one, for those who applied to become members of the Linguistics and AI Co-Evaluation Lab, we have received your CVs so far, and we are still receiving them until the end of October. We anticipate starting in December. The second note is if you'd like to receive the certificates of attendance for tonight's session, please send us your correct name with the correct email in the chat box. Let's say 10 minutes before we close the session. So let us start. Dr. Michael, once again, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you. Ewaret Tambash. B'khair bein.
Okay, Zorspas, thank you so much, Dr. Michael. So let me waste no more time and start with the first question about the Kurdish Dictionary Project. Doctor, let's start with this question. What inspired you to commit 18 years to the Kurdish English Dictionary? Farhang Abruski.
Well, Farhang Abruski is the second edition. The first edition came out in 2003, but the reason that the dictionary came out of notes that I was making to myself as I was teaching myself Kurdish. I just started taking notes. This is primarily Kurmanji, though I did study Sorani. But there was already a fairly good dictionary. Wahbi and Edmonds dictionary already existed, but something comparable in English did not exist for Kurmanji. So it started by taking notes for myself, and then when I was a grad student at UC Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, that's when Macintoshes came into existence, when everybody was buying a home computer. And so I took a course in how to use a computer, and everybody had to do a project for that course. So I decided to put the letter A of my dictionary, of what I had so far, to letter A and maybe also letter B. That was my project for the semester. So I used FileMaker Plus, which so I had individual fields for the name, the word, and then what if it was a noun, the gender, if it was a verb, whether it was transitive or intransitive, and then information. So for nouns, if it was masculine, then it would have ezafa and a oblique form. If it was a verb, you'd need the present stem. So, for instance, an example of a verb would be khwardin. Oh, kharin in Kurmanji is to eat, and as the khum. So you need those two forms. So in Sorani, khwardin dachom, dachoit dachwat, which is an irregular sort of verb, which I call nag verbs. When I teach Sorani, I call them nag verbs because I'm always nagging my students. Dedem de de dat, debem de be debat, dachom dachoit dachwat, derom doroit derwat. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I originally did letters A and B as that course project, and that got me started on the road to having a dictionary in the computer. So from there, I converted everything to, because the thing is with FileMaker Plus, each individual word, if you were to print it out, it would have been like 4 pages for each word. Just imagine how huge that would have been. So,
Right.
so I converted it to text, and then the whole thing fit very neatly in less than a page, and so that's how I got started. But it's because there was no no Kurmanji English dictionary at the time. There were Kurmanji Russian, Kurmanji Turkish, Kurmanji Arabic, Kurmanji French. There were lists of vocabulary in German and stuff, but there was next to nothing in English. So because I sort of see it that there was a reason why when I was a teenager I learned all of these languages. It was sort of as if I believed in predestination, I would say that I was chosen to learn all of these languages so that when it came time to study Kurdish, I had all of these languages already under my belt. So, for instance, Kurdish Russian dictionary was not an asteng, was not an obstacle for me. Not I knew enough Russian that I could use that, or the dictionaries in the other languages, Arabic and Turkish, for instance. I knew those languages, so that it's too much to ask somebody to learn 3 languages in order to learn Kurdish. But I already had all of those languages, so it's as if I had been chosen to learn all of these languages so that then I could give Kurdish the attention that it deserved. And I've always felt that when I write in English about the Kurds and the Kurdish language, then it's available for everybody. If I were to write it in a language that's less well known, then that would limit who would have access to it. So, in any case, I think that your other questions will.
Yes. The another question is, okay, since you have talked about the first steps of the dictionary, so what was your workflow for collecting inters, etymologies, and usage examples?
Well, again, all of as a teenager, all the languages that I had studied and used dictionaries. Like, for instance, the best Arabic English dictionary was Hans Wehr's dictionary. And that included, for nouns, for instance, it included the broken plural of nouns like walad, awlad. So other dictionaries didn't. Other dictionaries would just give you walad, boy, and you're done. But that dictionary included, for Arabic, it included the broken plural of nouns. It included for verbs like kataba, yaktubu. It would show you that the mudara is voweled with a dhamma, the yaktubu, and jalasa yajlisu. So all of that information, which was provided in that dictionary, that's the sort of stuff that I strive to provide in my dictionary. So as I said before, every noun you need to know whether it's masculine or feminine.
Right.
And so if it's masculine, then the izafa ending will be a. If it's feminine, the izafa ending will be a. So I provide that information. And then the oblique ending for masculine nouns can be e, or you'll have a noun like shivan, shivain, vi shivani, bajar, bajer, vi bajari. And for feminine nouns, the oblique ending will end, the tawang will end in a. So, for instance, jin, and then the izafa would be jina, chwesh, and jene, way jene, as way jene to be. So all that information, that it's masculine or feminine, and the inflections, both the izafa and the oblique, I provide. And then for verbs, you need to know three things for verbs. You need to know the infinitive, from which you can form the past tense. You need to know the present stem, and then you need to know whether it's transitive, te per, or intransitive, te na per, because that's very important both in Kurmanji and in Sorani. So, for instance, Khwardin, Kho, that would be in Sorani. In Kurmanji, Khwarin, and then the Khwim is the present, and then it's transitive, so the past tense will be min khwar. Whereas if you take an intransitive verb like hatin, intransitive, the past will be hatim. It's hatim to hati al hat. But for khwarin, it'll be min khwar, te khwar, wi khwar. So that information, just khwarin, vt, transitive, and then in parentheses, the present stem. All of that stuff. Some, if you look at the dictionaries, other dictionaries that exist, some of them provide some of this information, but some of them don't. I mean, just khwarin, to eat, is not enough. You need to know the present stem, and you need to know whether it's transitive or intransitive. That makes all the difference in the world. So you have to know the grammar in order to, if you know the grammar, then the information that I provide will enable you to use the word fully. And then I try, for every meaning that a word may have one meaning or it may have several meanings. For each meaning, I try and find sample sentences of usage. And so I use both written sources and spoken sources. So a written source is like if I'm reading a book, or if I'm reading a folk tale, or I'm reading an article, as I come across words that are unfamiliar to me, I would make a slip, I use old calendars. So on this side, I would write the word, and I would write the example of usage. And then on this side, I would look it up in all the dictionaries, and then I would write what each dictionary has. And then at the end, when you have, like, here's one I'm working on right now. So Babilich is the ring finger. So I got it just yesterday from a native speaker from Dahok. So he told me the names of several fingers. And then I've started looking it up in dictionaries. So you see here I have like a little abbreviation for each dictionary, and then I write the form as it appears. Some have Babilich, some have Babilichk, some have Babalichk, or Bablichik, or Bablich. So you have all of this variation. So I look and I see which one is dominant, and I also look to see in Central Kurdish, in Sorani, and in Zaza and Haurami, if possible, what the form is. Because if there is a form which exists both in Kurdimanji and in Sorani, if I can bring them closer together by choosing a form that exists in both of them, that seems to make more sense than to have a totally different form. And so that is. I also list all of the variant forms. So when I create it for Babelich, I'll also have Babalich and Bablich. I'll have all of those, and in parentheses where they're from, and then I will have them filed alphabetically according to those forms. So a user can look up the word by any one of those forms, and it will direct them to the main form, the main entry. And then when possible, I provide synonyms. So if there are other words with the same meaning, I will include them, and I try and have that in both directions. So if you look under the synonym, it should refer you back to this word as well. And then if it's possible to provide an etymology, then I provide that. And if it's a borrowed word, then I give that information. If it's a native word, and if it has cognates in other Iranian languages and even in other Indo-European languages, I will provide that information. And then at the end, I give all of the sources that I found the word in, because I'm not a native speaker of this language. Nobody should take what I say as why should they listen to me? The point is, I show all of the sources that I'm have found the word in, and so I can, the source can be a written source, or it can be a native speaker. It can be an informant. Like, for instance, that word Babelich, I got that from an informant, but then I looked it up in all of the dictionaries. What's very important is not to start from the dictionary, because a lot of the dictionaries have misinformation or have garbled forms, particularly earlier things from like the turn of the 19th century and early 20th century. A lot of those things were people, Westerners, who didn't know the language very well, and they might have misheard something. So, for instance, there's a word, simtin, which means kunkirden, to make a hole in something, to pierce. So it appears in an early dictionary as sontin. Sontin doesn't exist. It was what this Russian scholar heard. He probably heard simtin and misheard it as sontin. So I don't. It's very important to not give new life to old errors. That's why everything I must research everything and find as many sources as I can, so that I'm not giving new life to old errors. And I was advised very strongly about this at the beginning of my project by D.N. Mackenzie. Mm-hmm. And I think it was very good advice, and I've followed it all along. After I've done all the research looking up a word in the dictionaries, that's fine, but I need to see that it's actually used by people. Words that only exist in the dictionary that don't you ask a native speaker and they never heard it. Well, if they never heard it because it's from a different region than where they live, that's one thing. But if it's a word that somebody made up and is not used by the Kurds themselves, the point of the dictionary is to reflect the language as it's used by its speakers. And I have to be very loyal to that, faithful to that. I want to be I want the dictionary to be, a mirror of the language as it's used. And so the first edition came out in 2003. The second edition came out in 2020, just in time for COVID to prevent me from promoting it. I was going to go on a tour of different places to, like Kurdistan of Nashville, Tennessee,
Yes.
but I wasn't able to do that because of COVID. So the ironic thing is, being stuck at home during COVID, I found all of these wonderful Kurdish programs on YouTube. So and also I was giving lectures, thanks to Ibrahim Seydo Aydogan out of Paris. He, early on in the COVID epidemic, he said, "We're just sitting home doing nothing. Why don't we give university courses, give lectures via Zoom?" And so we did. So I have actually been in closer touch with Kurds since COVID began, through Zoom and through YouTube and things like that, than before. So I have now, when I hear a word in a program that I'm unfamiliar with, I'm not limited to just books or to people. I also, individual informants. I could also use a program as a source. So I'm working on a third edition, and I have so much more stuff now than even that second edition. I'm not even thinking about when it's going to be published. At this point, I'm just plugging away. But almost every day, I add some new words, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really hoping that it will be an even better source for people than the two earlier editions.
Yes, that was really impressive. So, the first edition was in 2003.
Yeah.
Was it by
Yale,
Yale?
Yale University Press. Yeah.
So, Doctor, what were the main linguistic and political challenges you encountered while standardizing dialects?
Well, I don't have the power or the authority to standardize anything on my own. I can only suggest, based on working on the dictionary. It became clear to me that, for instance, when a word has many different forms, when a multiform word, I need to choose one as the main entry and make all of the others references. So it seemed to me that, as part of nation building, that if to always be comparative, to always look at Sorani, Central Kurdish, and Zazaki and Haurami, and see if I can find a form, or uh, or choose a particular word rather than another word. The example I always give is the word for broom. So in Kurmanji, there are a dizzying number of words for broom. There's Gezi, there's Kenosha, there's Havlek, there's Sivnik, there's Shijing, there's Jarivk, Bermalk. It just goes on and on. So how do you figure out which one to use, like, for the standard language? So how do you say broom in Sorani? Gasik or Gisik, right? And in Zaza, it's Gazi. And in Haurami, it's Gizi. So it seems to me pretty clear that the Kurmanji word Gezi, and this is the most sensible one. In Sorani, it's Gasik or Gisik. In Zaza, it's Gazi. I'm putting this in the chat. And in Haurami, it's so it is my suggestion that the Kurmanji word Gezi be chosen as the standard word because it's so obviously this is one word with four different dialectal variations. Whereas the other word, the point of language is to be able to communicate, to understand each other. So if all of the other words in Kurmanji are very interesting. Kinoshe is from Aramaic. Havlik is from Armenian. Melkes, I didn't mention Melkes, which is from Arabic. Miknasa is from Arabic. I mean, they're all very interesting, and they tell us something about the history of the Kurds and who they lived with. But as far as standardizing the language, it just seems to me, it is my strong suggestion that Gezi should be chosen in that. I mean, that's just one example, but I'm trying to give you, but the point is how do I know that? Because I've done research. You have to do research. You don't just wake up one morning and say, well, I think we're going to use this word. Based on what? You have to justify it. You have to have, you have to have done research in order to justify why this form or this word should be chosen rather than another word. And believe me, after working at the Voice of America for 5 years, I heard everyone song and dance about my dialect is the purest, the best, better than everyone else. Well, if you want to establish a village, go ahead. But if you want to establish a nation, you have to think in terms of the whole nation. And that is my drushim. That is my slogan that I see before my eyes with everything that I do. What is going to help in nation building? What is helpful? What is going to facilitate what we're trying to do here? And what, by contrast, what is going to be an obstacle? So an obstacle is that Kurdish used to be written in at least three different alphabets: Latin, Arabic, and then Cyrillic in the former Soviet Union. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, the Kurds of the former Soviet Union, so Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Russia, etc., basically have switched to the Latin orthography. So now we're down to two. But half of Kurdistan uses the Latin script, half of Kurdistan uses the Arabic script. So first of all, in my dictionary, every main entry, side by side, I have the main entry in the Latin script and in the Arabic script, which is, it does several things. First of all, it makes the word accessible to people coming from either alphabet. And second of all, because I've done it through the dictionary everywhere, it reinforces the simple one-on-one correspondence between the Latin orthography and the Arabic orthography for Kurdish. And the way that what convinced me that it was necessary to have all the main entries in both the Latin and the Arabic script was early on in 1992, 1993, when I started going down to Kurdistan of San Diego once a month. I went from 1992 to 1994. Once a month, I went down and visited the Kurds in San Diego. And I took with me some samples of the dictionary that I had up till then. And because it was all in Latin script and they were largely Iraqi Kurds, they could not easily read it. And when I saw that, I thought, well, I need to have the main entries in both alphabets so that it's accessible to Kurds coming from Iraq and Iran as well. So I did that early on, and then that also fed into uh, the uh, the Kurdish, the one-on-one correspondence in the library world, which I am responsible for or guilty of, depending on how you look at it. But that, I mean, that all of that was happening at the same time that I was working on the dictionary. So all of these things in my life really dovetailed. They really flow in and out of each other.
Why did you choose to begin with Kurmanji rather than Sorani? Yeah.
I think I already said there already was a Sorani English dictionary,
Okay.
Wahbi and Edna,
Yes. You have talked
but
about.
there wasn't anything comparable for Kurmanji.
You also mentioned some sources. Okay. What about the oral sources?
Well, I mean, I was I was I became aware of the Kurds through my visits to Turkey first. But then when I came back to the States, I'm I met Kurds from Iraq and Iran. Um, but in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, it was very hard to find native speakers of Kurmanji. There were people who knew some Kurdish, but they spoke Turkish to each other rather than Kurdish, which was not going to help. I already knew Turkish. That was not going to help me. Every time a a new Kurd appeared who came to the city, I went with hopes of, wow, finally, maybe I've met somebody who I can speak with. Because at this point, all I had was a reading knowledge of a largely spoken language. It was very frustrating. I didn't hear it much. Remember, this was in the period before uh, the internet, before cell phones. Even it was if you didn't um, see somebody, there also you couldn't get newspapers. Now you just go to the internet and you can find newspapers and you can find news reports. You can find stuff at your fingertips. But it wasn't like that in those days. So every time a a newly arrived Kurd uh, came, I came across a newly arrived Kurd. Um, I was hoping that finally I met somebody who I can speak this language with and learn to speak it better. And I would just hear over and over again, well, I grew up in Istanbul and we really know Turkish better and all that. So I became very frustrated. And then in 1992, a Kirkuki friend of mine who lived in the Bay Area said, for Nowruz, let's hop on a plane and fly down to San Diego because there's a newly arrived group of Kurds. This was in 1992. So people who had fled from Halabja and had fled over the border into Turkey and had lived in camps there for several years just arrived in San Diego and in Nashville and in Dallas, Texas, and Fargo, North Dakota, and places like that. So we went down because I had known that there was a Kurdish community in San Diego, but I didn't know anybody there. I didn't know how to get get to know them. So this was a golden opportunity. So we went down and we met all of these newly arrived Kurds. A lot of them were Berwadis from the Dahok region, from villages in the Dahok region. And one family in particular said, come back and see us again. So for the next 2 years, once a month, I flew down to San Diego and I paid for it out of my own pocket. I didn't get any funding from the university. And that was the first time that I actually had regular contact with Kurmanji speakers. And there were also, at the same time, I met some Sorani speakers down there too, because they had both. But it was less of a challenge with Sorani, because with Sorani, there were people around. This Kirkuki friend of mine, his mother, so his mother and his wife did not get along. He had two houses, and he and his wife and son lived in one house, and his mother lived in another house. And so I would go and visit her, and she would talk my head off. She would make really good homemade Kurdish food, and remember, I was like 22 years old or something like that. So, well, maybe 25 years old, but a young man with a good appetite, and she would cook for me, and she would just talk and talk and talk, and in Sorani. So I mean, for Sorani, I got my earful. It was great. I had worked my way through several textbooks and stuff, and here was somebody speaking the language. So for Sorani, I didn't have the same challenges. It was for Kurmanji that I just couldn't find anything like that locally. So it was worth my while to hop on a plane once a month and fly down to Kurdistan of San Diego to be able to get used to using the language. And also, in the books that existed for Kurmanji were mostly things that were published by the Soviet Kurdologists. So the Serhedan dialect, which is very different from the Behdini dialect. So when I went down there, I was exposed to the Behdini dialect, which stood me in very good stead later on when I moved to Washington to be the editor of the Kurdish service, where a lot of the people were Behdini speakers. So, but also by then I was hearing the language on a regular. When I moved to Washington, I heard both Kurmanji and Sorani on a regular basis. So, and we had to use it in broadcasting. So, I learned all sorts of new words. But the frustrating thing is sometimes we had to come up with a word by later that day for broadcasting. And in those days, again, before the internet, it was really hard to know sometimes what word to use. So somebody would suggest something, and we would go with it for the time being. But sometimes I would, like, for instance, I did a program once about, I think it was about butterflies, and there are so many words for butterfly in Kurmanji. There's minminik and belantik and pinpinik, and it just goes on and on. And in Sorani, you have perwana is a moth, and papula, is that the Sorani word for
Yes, it's Papula.
yeah. So there are so many words in Kurmanji that at the beginning of this program that I did on the radio, I said, I started by saying, I'm going to be speaking about this insect, and it's called this and this and this and this and this. But in this program, we're going to call it, let's say, Belantik. But just so you know, so I would explain so that people wouldn't just hear it and not, coming from one. Yes, Mariam, exactly. We go from one dialect or another, or one subdialect to another subdialect. So I was trying to make listening to the radio an educational thing for Kurds too. For learning about other subdialects of their own language, rather than assuming that everybody would understand a word that Khalaf Zebari used in his village near Acre. It's not necessarily a word that other people would be familiar with. So I tried to explain. And I also, I had a program called Zmane Meh, Our Language, every Saturday for like 8 minutes, in which I would talk about linguistic issues dealing with Kurdish.
So you have talked about the additions, new entries, right?
Uh,
So is there any plan
Somewhat, yeah.
for a Sorani English volume?
For me,
Yes,
well, I mean, Shafiq Kazaz's dictionary is, I had always thought that Tawfiq and
Tawfiq.
Wahbi's dictionary needed to be updated. And I feel that Shafiq Kazaz's dictionary has gone a long way towards doing that, towards being the my dreamed of update. But there are several words that are missing from it, and there are lots of misprints, lots of English words that are misspelled because it was not proofread. And also, there are a lot of Arabic words which are very commonly used in Sorani that he has not put in the dictionary that need to be there. Um, so I have thoughts about um, what what a new edition of it could include, but I mean, I have my hands full with what I'm doing right now. But if somebody wanted to take that on as a project, I would be happy to take on an advisory position because I have all sorts of notes which I've put in my copy. When I find a word that's not there, I write it in the margins. Words that I would hope would ultimately. Sometimes they're words that you'll find in Hambana Borine in Hajar's dictionary, but they're not in Khazaz's dictionary. Or sometimes they're in Gil Mukriani's dictionary, Kurdistan. Um, but I would take Shafiq Khazaz's dictionary as the basis for for an an expanded um, edition.
right. Um, so, Doctor, what do you hope your dictionary offers to Kurdish literacy efforts?
My my goal is when somebody's reading something and they come across a word that they don't know, that they should be able to look it up and actually find it in my dictionary.
Uh-huh.
Um, there, a good dictionary is one in which just about everything you look up you can find in. Like I think of uh, Hans Wehr's Arabic English dictionary. For the modern Arabic language, it has just about everything. Though now there are new words like drone and stuff like that that aren't in the edition I have. I mean, the language is constantly evolving and stuff like that. But I I have come a long way because words that I come across that I don't know, when I create an entry for them, that means that that will be there for other people. But there are always going to be more words out there. But still, that's my goal. That you're reading something, you come across a word that's unfamiliar to you, that you should be able to find it in my dictionary. That's what my hope and my goal is to be able to provide that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to a certain extent, I have, but there are always there are always more words out there. I have all these files of things that I haven't put in the dictionary yet. You want? Let me just show you. This is letters A to L. These are individual slips for letters A to L. There are all sorts there are things that I collected from native speakers over the years or in reading things, things that I didn't find um, enough information about. So there are things that are like on the back burner, waiting, and then it happens occasionally that I'm reading along and I find something and I look and oh my God, I had this word already, but I didn't have enough information. Now I have more information, so then I can flesh it out and add it to the dictionary. I do that whenever possible. So it's, but I always try and provide as much information on that slip as I had at the time, in the hopes that if at some point in the future, sometimes it's as simple as the word has a different form which is more common, and I didn't know that. Like for instance, let's say, so piaz in Sorani is onion. In Kurmanji, it's pivaz, but in one region they say pizav. So if I came across pizav first and I didn't know what it was, eventually I would discover that pizav is a variant of pivaz, meaning onion, basal in Arabic. But if I were to come across pizav first, which is the less common form of it, I wouldn't know of the existence till pivaz till later on. I'm just giving that as an example. Pivaz I've known about for a long time, but I'm just giving that as an example of that sort of, they call it metathesis, when two letters switch places.
Yes, this is the
Have I ever authored a dictionary?
okay. Yes, Dr. Chyet, that there's the last question from me, so we will start with the questions from chat box because we have so many questions. Okay. Last question from me.
Last question from you?
Yes, what lessons did you learn that would guide future lexicographers working on minority languages, just like Kurdish?
Well, you want every informant to feel that you're taking them seriously, that you respect them, that you're not disregarding what they say. But informants are very important. But you have to know what sort of questions to ask them. Like if somebody's telling you a word, what's a good example? Like let's say dest means hand, okay? So that's not enough. You need to know, is it masculine? Is it feminine? You say destamen or destamen? You have to know how to elicit from your informant the information that you need to put it into the dictionary. Just the dest means hand is not enough. And the informant won't necessarily know how to, they won't say dest and it's masculine. They won't know that. But you have to know how to elicit that information. Ask them, how would you say my hand? So then they'd say destamen, not destamen, because it's masculine. So they would be telling you that it's masculine without knowing that that's what they're telling you. But you, as the lexicographer, as the collector of the information, have to know what sort of questions to ask to elicit the information you need. Let's take it for a verb. Let's say you have the word juaren, and you don't know whether it's transitive or intransitive. Ask them, how would you say I did it in the past? Are they going to say min juar, which would make it transitive, or ez juarem, which would make it intransitive? And it's not the case. Ez juarem actually would mean somebody ate me. But I mean, again, they're not going to tell you it's juaren means to eat and it's transitive. They're not going to know that. They're not going to be able to say that. But you have to know how to elicit that by asking certain questions about the word. Use it in a sentence. Don't just tell me the word. Use it in a sentence. And then when they use it in a sentence, that might automatically provide what you need to know about the gender of a noun or the transitivity of a verb. Or if they just give you juaren, well, that doesn't tell you the present stem. You need to ask, how do you say I do it now? As dechum. So you, the lexicographer, needs to know what sort of questions to ask to get as much information as possible from the native speaker about the word to be able to add it to the dictionary. Does that make sense? You're muted.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Yes, it was really insightful. So if you don't mind, I will start with some questions from chat boxes from participants.
Fermo.
The first question is from Diler Piran. Uh, Asks, I would like to ask what is the first step to writing a dictionary? I have considered this for a long time now, but I can't bring myself to actually start creating a dictionary. Maybe because I am afraid that I cannot finish it. Any insights for or advice from Dr. Chyet?
Well, what sort of dictionary
Mhm.
does Dallaire want to create? Is it uh I mean, what I would do is do research and find out what is lacking, what we don't have that we need. For instance, more Kurmanji to Sorani and Sorani to Kurmanji dictionaries. That's something that we don't have many of them of. Or a good Kurmanji to Kurmanji or a good Sorani to Sorani dictionary. Also, there are dictionaries of particular fields such as engineering, medicine. I mean, there are some, but there are not ones that are fully detailed. And if you wanted to do that, would it be both Kurmanji and Sorani, which would be helpful? And then if it's in Kurmanji and Sorani, it would need to be, of course, in both alphabets. In any case, it should be in both alphabets because you want all Kurds to be able to use it. And if you're going to do it in both alphabets, then I would ask you to use the standard orthography, not just the Latin alphabet, the Latin orthography for Kurdish, because there's a simple one-on-one correspondence between the Latin and the Arabic orthography, and I'm going to put the link to that in the chat
Good.
so that everybody has access to it, because this is not a secret. Here.
Okay, shall I read the second question?
If I answered the first one to Delaire's satisfaction, then yeah, I hope so.
So the second question from someone asks a question to Dr. Child, what standardized dictionary, project, textbook, or publication are you most proud of so far and why? Did you get the question?
What standardized dictionary, project, textbook, or publication am I most proud of?
And why?
Something of mine? Something that I've published?
Maybe.
Because for me to be proud of someone else's work, that makes less sense. But I'm proud of the of having introduced to the library world the the concept of the one-on-one correspondence between the Latin and Arabic orthography, which should not be limited, in my opinion, to the library world, but that should be how all Kurds learn how to read and write their language in both alphabets. That's my, I mean, what I have succeeded in doing so far. The dream that I made a reality was in the library world. And my textbooks have not been published yet because every time I think that they're ready, I teach the course again and I realize, oops, I forgot this, or I need to explain this better or something. So those are still works in progress. But anybody who studies Kurdish with me has access to what I will make available, the textbook as it exists at that time. I hope that answers the questions. And
Okay. And a list of questions from Mustafa Fakhir Najmuddin. Indeed, it is four questions.
yeah. Why
What?
lexicology and lexicography is a neglected branch in linguistics field. Well, I'm not sure that everybody all linguists would agree that it is a neglected branch. But you mean specifically Kurdish lexicography as opposed to all languages? I don't know. I question that it is a neglected branch.
Okay.
Two, do you think that writing past and present forms of bases as as an independent lexical entry, because we see in Kurdish dictionaries only bases as a lexical entry? Past and present form. Well, so what you can do is list the citation form. Most people agree the citation form is the infinitive. But then for the present stem, what I'm going to do in the third edition of my dictionary is have what I have in one of my textbooks, in both my textbooks, which is a list of the present stems, so that you can look them up by the present stem if it's not obvious what the infinitive would be. But I think that it makes sense to use the infinitive as the citation form for all verbs. From that, you form the past tense. And by providing the present stem as part of the entry for the verb, it's I think that's the right way to go. But having a separate chart which has the present stem of dictionaries, of verbs, sorry, the present stem of verbs might be helpful. 3, how many years we need to update dictionary in any language? Well, some dictionaries, every year they come out with a new dictionary in an updated form. That's for languages where you have enough people and enough money to do that. I'm not the only Kurdish lexicographer, but I'm largely working on my own, and I don't have the ability to do it every year. And I don't think I have enough information in one year to make it worthwhile anyway. But I would say once you have enough new information to make it worthwhile, you should think about an updated. For instance, there is one problem with the first edition of my dictionary, which was corrected by the second edition. And that is, so Kurmanji has 4 consonants that have aspirated and unaspirated pairs. Ka, ta, pa, and cha. Sorani does not, supposedly. So there's ka and ka, pa and pa, ta and ta, and cha and cha. Okay? So very few dictionaries make a distinction. They write them all the same, which is not very helpful because I want to be able to accurately reflect is the P in the word pir, meaning a bridge, aspirated or unaspirated. So only the Soviet, for the most part, it was the Soviet Kurdologists under the influence of Armenian, which has separate letters for each of the pairs, that provided that information. But at the same time, these Soviet Kurdologists confused for the ch sound. They wrote everything that was an aspirated ch as unaspirated and vice versa. And I didn't know that. I assumed that they knew what they were talking about. So in the first edition, whenever they had a ch, like for instance, the word chav, they had it as an aspirated ch. I thought, I don't easily hear the difference. I'm not a native speaker of the language, but they had it as ch as an aspirated. They spelled it like this. You see that little apostrophe after the ch is supposed to be aspirated. But it turns out that the word chav is actually unaspirated. So all of the words with ch, I followed the Soviet Kurdologists, and I got it wrong. So I had 3 native speakers go through all of the letters pa, ta, ka, and cha before I published the second edition. I got them to tell me which ones. So basically, for the ones beginning with cha, I flipped them. But I got, people said, how come I made that mistake? Well, I just explained. I was giving new life to an old error, which is a big no-no, which is what I'm setting out not to do that. So in the second edition, I righted that wrong. And if I become aware of other mistakes like that, I hope to correct them by the third edition. But oh, and then there was one more question in there, right? Do you think that writing grammatical information in front of lexical entry or in front of dictionary as a grammar summary? A lot of dictionaries have a section which is a brief grammatical summary of the language. And I've thought about that. It's probably a good idea to do. For the third edition, I may add something like that. But it won't be as detailed as the actual textbook. It would be more a reference grammar. Because the textbook includes exercises and and things like that. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chyet. My dear participants, if you have any question, you can raise your hand and at the bottom of the screen, or simply you can use the chat box. So another question from
Hussein Rasul, have I ever authored a dictionary? What is its name, please? Can we obtain it? So I have mentioned that.
Yeah.
And let me just share the screen for a minute.
Mhm.
Wait a minute. Because you have a nice picture in the questions. Here it is. So, can you see that? This is the first edition, 2003 from Yale University Press, Ferhenga Kurmanji Inglisi. And then the second edition from 2020, Ferhenga Bruski, is in 3 volumes. This is the first one, volumes letters A to L. The second volume, letters M to Z. And the third one is English to Kurdish. It's basically an index of the first 2 editions. And the third one is very thin. The third edition, I expect to expand the English to Kurdish part considerably. I'm also going to be adding in brackets how to pronounce the English words for Kurds who might be using the dictionary to improve their English. They need to know how to pronounce the English words. So that's something I'm thinking of adding for the third edition.
Okay, so Mariam says, as Kurds, we appreciate your efforts to keep Kurdish language alive. Is that dictionary available?
The second edition is available through Transnational Press out of London. Here, let me put that in. Transnational Press out of London. Yes. And if you Google it, or my name and Transnational Press, or Kurdish and Transnational Press, it'll come up.
Good.
And I think it's also available on Kindle.
Kindle, yes.
I think so.
So last question, Dr. Chyet from Araz Muhammad. Dr. Chyet, as someone who has worked extensively with Kurdish, Arabic, and other Middle Eastern languages, how do you see the relationship between language preservation and lexicography, especially in minority or endangered languages?
Well, I make a point of including in my dictionary as many terms as I can find of folklore and traditional Kurdish culture. Whether it's, for instance, when a baby is born, the Danuk with child's tooth, the child's first tooth. Wait a minute. Let me find the what I have in the dictionary as an example of that. I'm looking it up. Okay, so let me again share. So you see danok, and it's feminine, and the izafa is a special celebration. When a child's first tooth appears, a dish made of boiled unground wheat and chickpeas is prepared and shared among family and friends. Most participants are women. And then in Turkish, it's called dish buğdayı. And then I have an example of it from a native speaker from Hazo, Kozluk in Kurdistan of Turkey. Emeiro danoke ferhat dainen. Wunji weren mali min. So in that dialect, their izafas are always a rather than a, even for feminine nouns. That's why I have sick there. And then in Sorani, the equivalent is dana roka. And you see, these are the sources that I found it in. So Haz, that was the informant was from Hazo, and then I found it in these two dictionaries, the same form, and then in this dictionary, it was the form Daniye Dranan. So I have, and then it also says Si Danu, boiled whole wheat. So these are examples of, there are all of these different forms of grain. Like there's Dan Herk, Dan Kut. So these sorts of minute details which a native speaker may know, or at least the older generation may know, and the younger generation may not be sure of. I try and find as many of these things and put as much information as I can about them, because I don't want these things to die out. Which, of course, gets into the question of Kurdish parents who are depriving their children of the Kurdish language so that they won't be mistreated by governments that are going to mistreat them no matter what language they speak, because they're still Kurds. But anyway, that gets out of lexicography. Is it possible, Sakala Stanley, is it possible for one who has his undergraduate in linguistics but master in English education to do a PhD in linguistics? Well, I mean, it depends on the policy of a particular university, but if you're interested in doing a PhD in linguistics, go for it. Well, I mean, if that's your dream, why should you let anybody prevent you from doing it? And Kurmanji Vian Shiana, if you want, where there's a will, there's a way. You are muted again.
Okay, there's also another question before Stanley from Professor Dr. Abbas Mustafa.
The printing house?
That there's from Mustafa. Before that is from Professor Dr. Abbas, Hambana Borina, Khosrow Jaff's workers, and Farhangi Etymology Kurdi by
Hambana Borina. This is how you spell that in the Latin orthography. Henbana Borina. Don't use an A for an S sound, please. It's not Hambana Borina. It's Hembana Borina. Khosrow Jaff's works and Farhangi Etymology Kurdi by Shaswar Harshami were employed as linguistic frameworks to bridge Kurdish subdialects. What potential forms of unity or mutual understanding might emerge among Kurdish speakers? Well, now that there's broadcasting in Kurdish, and you can hear it on a daily basis, either on the radio or on YouTube. Somebody who, if you listen once, if you're a Kurmanji speaker and you hear Sorani once, you may not understand it. But if you listen every day for a month, you'll be surprised how much you'll understand. It's a matter of continued, sustained exposure to the other dialect. Yesterday, every Sunday, I have a Zoom chat session with several Kurmanji speaking friends. And yesterday, somebody from Dahok was with us, and he was speaking in his dialect. And I asked the other people from Diyarbakir and Jazira Bota if they understood him, and they said they did, because both of them have been exposed to speech of several different subdialects quite a bit. But they had three people speaking in several Kurmanji subdialects and easily understanding each other. And it's don't be discouraged if the first time you hear something you don't understand it. I'll give the example of when I was a kid once. I was on a bus and I heard somebody speaking English with a very thick Scottish brogue, and I didn't understand a word he said. And then 5 minutes later, he got off the bus, and I never saw him again. But my reality for the next 20 years was when people speak with a Scottish accent, I don't understand it. Now, I heard it for 5 minutes. I don't know his name. I didn't live next to him for weeks or years or months or anything. I just had that one brief encounter, and I allowed that to be generalized to I never understand. I just cannot understand when Scottish people speak English. But since then, I've had ample opportunity to hear English spoken with a Scottish accent, and after you listen for a while, you get used to it. But the point is, after a while, you can't just hear it once and say, "Oh, I don't understand this." You have to allow for time. If you do it every day, if you listen every day, for anybody learning any language anyway, if you listen on a regular basis to broadcasts in that language, if you listen every day for a month, you'll be amazed at how much you understand. And if you don't, then don't complain if you find it hard, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity that you need to be exposed to it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chyet. It's been more than 1 hour. So before closing this session, do you have any advice, instruction for the young new lexicographers?
If you have any questions that I can answer, please email me. Here, I'll put my email in the chat. I have a lot of words that I haven't added to my dictionary yet because I'm waiting to get more information on them. But I would be happy to share it, the knowledge that I have with anybody who's embarking on a similar project.
Good. Thank you so much, Dr. Chyet. It was really a wonderful session. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your story, and deep knowledge with us once again. It's always such a privilege to learn from you. And thanks to all of you who joined us tonight. Your questions, your curiosity, and your presence really make this session special. So we will be meeting again soon for another session with Dr. Chyet, but we haven't fixed the exact date yet, but it will likely be sometimes maybe in November. I don't know. So
Mm.
we will keep you updated by email and on our Telegram channel. So stay tuned. Until then, keep exploring languages, stay curious, and have a great evening, everyone. Take care and goodbye.
And thank you, thank you, Senger, for the information that you gave me at the beginning. It's invaluable about the fingers and about that lullaby. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
Anytime, you're welcome. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Khwatan lagal. Bye bye.